So Christian nationalism is our topic for today, very much a hot topic. And I'm delighted to be joined by Jamie Bambrick. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. Appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to discussing.
There's certainly lots to talk about this topic. It seems lots of people are opposing it, and not many people maybe even are sure what it is or are trying to defend it. So it's quite an interesting dynamic, I think, in the UK at the moment. But Jamie, I thought it'd be helpful to start with a bit of common ground. I don't know if we're going to agree or disagree later on. We shall see. Time will tell. A bit of common ground, right? I mean, would you agree that we're both people who would see sort of left-wing syncretism in the church being infused with left-wing thinking and it's sort of taken for granted? We're on the same page.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think that, and the stats bear that out, by the way, that the average evangelical is actually in the UK, or the average Christian in the UK is actually slightly further to the left than the general populace when it comes to their political leanings, and therefore makes them actually pretty radically left-wing, given that we are in a pretty radically left-wing country at the moment, with the current Labour Party, as far as I'm concerned, being the most left-wing party that we've ever had in government. People may argue a little bit over, Clement Attlee or something, but Clement Attlee was not liberal in the modern sense when it comes to a lot of the social and cultural issues. So yeah, definitely, totally agreed on that.
I would say if the individual Christians are very left-wing, I'd say sort of okay. But my issue is it comes into the church. It becomes the ethos of the church. Regardless, the church is in many ways feminized, in many ways sort of overly nice, soft, gentle, tends to be weak on moral issues, more concerned with staying mates with the politicians than promoting goodness, challenging evil. And we're on the same wavelength here, are we?
100%.
And then the idea of Christians like signing joint letters to tell people off for holding crosses at Tommy Robinson rallies, utterly mad, just total madness.
Yes, given the context in which we live, that is not the problem, for that the church needs to be addressing at this point. It really is. It's straining out a gnat to swallow a camel. And furthermore is actually, I think, counterproductive to what could at least potentially be an evangelistic moment. One of the things that I'm encouraged by, and I'm sure we'll get into this more, is that there are people who are broadly on the political right, who have plenty of flaws and foibles, but who are actually interested in Christianity and interested in what Christianity has to say about the public square. And so the church going, no, we definitely don't want to engage with you at all. And we don't have any answers there for you, at least not ones that recognize any of the problems that you're bringing forward. Seems like a huge missed opportunity from an evangelistic and missional perspective, as well as also the public witness of the church.
Yeah. So we're sort of on the same page with those things. I would say not too long ago, I would have felt that we were sort of at the end of the spectrum. I don't know what you call the spectrum of sort of views of the church, but I would view myself as sort of pretty well at one end of it, the straight talking, challenge evil, speak clear, etc. That end. But I feel like Christian nationals come along, and it's extended the spectrum. It's put some whole new places to go to further in that direction, which it's really got me thinking. It's got me thinking a lot. So Christian nationalism, how did you come across it? What's been your engagement with it at the moment? Have you researched it a lot or discussed it?
To a reasonable extent, yes. I mean, I would say that I don't embrace the term on a personal level. I think because it is such a loaded term, and I think it's not necessarily a wise term for actually describing what I believe. But nonetheless, I think there is a lot among those who have actually thought through this seriously, that the church does need to take into consideration. So the two books that I've sort of done a good degree of reading on and thought about are Stephen Wolfe's The Case for Christian Nationalism, who does embrace the term. Yep, you got it there. And Douglas Wilson's Mere Christendom. And then another one that I'm currently working through is James B. Jordan. Oh, there you go. You get the hardback. I'm so stingy. I just do Kindle.
I couldn't find the softback.
Yeah, well, there you go. And then James B. Jordan's Christendom and the Nations is another one. Now that's more to do with understanding what a nation is, which I think is a really important question that I think the church is getting wrong actually at the minute, and is making some bad category errors when it comes to distinguishing between what the church is and what the nation is. So done good reading, and I do think, I mean, in a more broad sense, not just explicitly on that area, but this area of public theology and of Christian cultural engagement and political Protestant political theory. You know, these are areas that I think are really important, that I've got involved in and read a lot around in a more general sense, without necessarily at all being on that particular version of Christian nationalism. So yeah, I think it's probably been the last few years that I've been, you know, exploring this more deeply, and then over the last couple of years read those, you know, aforementioned books, and think they do make some very good points, albeit that I obviously, like you, have my own, you know, questions, queries, and you know, things that I might say or phrase a bit differently.
Yeah, I'm very late to the party, and I think during the last couple of months I've started getting into books. I've been aware a while that more people talk about, you know, we're a Christian nation, and trying to base arguments on that, which is something I've never really been particularly in tune with. Then in politics, I mean, it's unbelievable. It seems like everyone wants to talk Christian, whether they're Christian or not, everyone wants to talk Christian. So that's attracting my attention to it. So I've done a bit of research as well. The books you mentioned, I mean, probably the book that pushed me most towards the sort of Christian national book was a book that wasn't about Christian nationalism.
Right.
It's basically saying, if you have a liberal society where the idea is people can live their lives according to their own values, that there's no right and wrong, there's no good and bad way to live your life, everyone just live your life as you please, well, it sort of falls to bits. It might carry on with the momentum for a while, but ultimately, if there aren't these values to hold people together and guide people's actions, it falls to bits. I read this one as well, which I quite recommend, actually. It's a response to Stephen Wolfe's book.
Sure, yes, I know of it. I haven't read it, but do know of it.
Yeah, so I've done quite a bit of research, and there are some things that have given me pause for thought, and maybe think, yeah, there are things that are valid here to push forward. I agree with the term. I wouldn't want to apply the term to myself. And the main reason for that is, I mean, in some of these books, I mean, you mentioned Stephen Wolfe's book. I mean, I read that. I was absolutely shocked by some of the things in it. Sure. I would say it's like the worst Christian book I've ever read. I couldn't believe what I was reading. So I think it would be good to try and start off and say, some people who criticize Christian nationalism, I think, from my point of view, I've got to acknowledge that some of the things under that banner, they've got a point, because they are extremely radical, to say the least. So, for example, like death penalty for heretics.
Sure.
I mean, to me, that's just utterly anti-Christian, nuts, bonkers. And that's sort of Stephen Wolfe seems to entertain that. James Baird in his book seems to be entertaining that. But I think for that sort of idea to be entering into the mainstream of Christian thought is quite concerning.
Yeah. I mean, I think though that's certainly the most extreme version thereof of that position. I do think, though, that Christians are not obligated to advocate for a pluralistic society, or to even give equal footing, particularly in the public square, to all religions. And we know this because, you know, there are religions that we do know this about. For instance, we don't really want Aztec sacrifices and hearts being ripped out, you know, in order to get the weather better, you know, things like that. So it's right that Christians can look at these things and go, well, these religions actually are destructive and negative. And therefore we can, you know, prescribe those in some ways. And I don't think that's not a radical thought at all by historical Christian standards. Christians have always believed that Christianity deserves particular protection, and that other religious viewpoints, particularly ones that are very hostile and very destructive, can be limited. So yes, I wouldn't think that advocating for someone who is incorrect theologically needs to receive the death penalty by any means, and I don't really think that that's the role of the church even to do so, which I think is the important point here, by the way, that church and state are different, and I don't necessarily want the state deciding who is a heretic and then deciding to execute people for that. But I do think that there is a little bit of a point in that Christians today will advocate for, well, do you know what, Islam has just as much right to public expression and to build mosques wherever it likes and to take over Trafalgar Square with mass prayer meetings. And I would say, no, actually, I don't think that should be the case. I think that we can advocate for the 10 commandments in the public square. So, the first two of the 10 commandments are, you shall have no other gods before me, and you shall make no graven images. And I think that doesn't mean necessarily that everybody individually in society is going to follow that in their hearts or in their homes. But I do think in the public square, we can go, no, actually, we would limit the practice of other religions. I don't think that we should be building mosques in the UK. I think that's a bad thing, and I don't think that's a radical viewpoint by any historical standard. So while some people are pushing that right out to the extreme point, I still think there is something of a point in there of total religious pluralism and equality between religions in the public square. It is something that Christians can go, do you know what? No, actually, we don't have to do that. And again, we know that because we know that there are religions that we would say, actually, that's not one that we want to have as part of our society.
So do you approve of similar behavior in, for example, Muslim countries? Where they'll say,
no, because Islam is false and Christianity is true. So I think governments should be beholden to the truth, and therefore, whilst they have, I don't actually think we should be going and engaging in warfare for that. But I do think that there is a difference between what is true and what is false. So take the same example. If you take an Aztec, again, go to the most extreme. Go to as the logical endpoint of the discussion. If you take an Aztec society, should we stop Aztec worship, which involves ripping out hearts? Yes, we should. Should they permit churches to be built? Yes, they should, because Christianity is true and right. And so I don't really have a problem with going, no, not all religions are equal, and therefore should not be treated as such, because one is right.
The thing is, with the Aztecs, we've already got that one covered, because what they would do would be illegal in any case.
Would be murder. Yeah.
So
I
think the implication of what you're saying, though, is that you're happy to delegate responsibility for deciding what's heresy and what's truth in the religious sphere to the government.
No, I don't think it's necessarily about the government is beholden to truth. The government the government is not a law unto itself. The government is, as the Bible says in Romans 13, a minister of God, and therefore actually has to answer to God, and therefore has to have some awareness of what is right and wrong. Now, there are different ways and different levels of responsibility that the government has, but I think you can either go down the route of natural law, or you can go down the route of the 10 commandments really being the foundation, or some sort of mix of both. And I haven't quite parsed this out perfectly in my own mind either. But the government is to recognize God. The government, because all societies do recognize their God. Every society is functionally theocratic in some sense, in that the God of that society does determine the legal structure of that society. And therefore, I have no problem with the government going, no, we do recognize God, and it's the triune God, it's the God of Christianity, and that is the foundation of our legal system. And so the government is not an imbecile, and shouldn't be treated as such. The government has moral responsibility before God and does have to parse these things out to some extent, but without taking on the role of a pastor or a bishop or a denominational leader where they're conducting heresy trials, but knowing what the foundation of the society is and knowing who God is and what he requires of them is something that governments are called to do.
I mean, reading and listening to some of the proponents for Christian nationalism, and they would say, for example, Catholics, as far as they're concerned, are not Christian, so the nation would be declared, a Protestant nation, and the laws, etc., are going to be based on that. But to my mind, declaring that's at odds with the way our system works, and that you elect a government and they implement policies according to their values. I think any attempt to override that process or undermine it, I think it's going to lead to problems, because it's going to be against the will of the people. The normal idea with democracy is that you elect a government who enact policies according to their values, and people can vote for the government according to their values. Then alongside democracy, you have human rights, which have got a very bad name for good reason. But fundamentally, that is, you have human rights to stop a majority persecuting a minority, because otherwise that could happen under a democracy. You can say it does happen already. And so that's the danger it's trying to stop. It's trying to stop one group getting the reins of power and using it to persecute, discriminate against the other group. So you're saying that there would be okay to sort of opt out of that way of thinking.
I don't quite understand the question. Sorry, I'm trying to grasp what. So are you saying that? Are you asking, I suppose, that I think that democracy and human rights, that the will of the people and some sort of general human rights is not a sufficient foundation for our legal system? No. Is that what you're? I'm just trying to answer the question correctly.
I'll try again. I'll try again.
Yeah.
So with democracy, the idea is that parties put forward their manifesto and they explain their values, and the electorate elect a government on the basis of those values and those policies. And so hopefully those values reflect a majority of the population and the will of the people. I know it's not perfect. That's roughly the idea. But then alongside that, there's the idea of human rights, which prevent, for example, a majority get the government they want,
a genocide,
but then they use that government to persecute and discriminate against the minority, which happens. I mean, that's the way history's progressed in lots of countries. That's the way it still progresses in a lot of countries today. Whereas one group gets power and they use it to discriminate against the other group, and so it becomes a sort of identity battle. So that's the current understanding. Democracy and human rights, that's how they combine. But you're saying you'd want to move away from that. That if a majority gets the power, then they can use that to discriminate against whatever you want to call it, other religions.
No, I don't think you have. So your understanding of human rights has to be founded upon something, and so the idea, that human beings do have, individual worth, even if they are in the minority. That's really a Christian idea. That is a Christian sentiment, and so I think that you need actually underneath that. So whilst that might be how the political process plays out, firstly, I don't think necessarily that democracy is the only viable legal system for a society. I don't think it's necessarily more. It's you can certainly make an argument for its strengths, but you can also argue that it has weaknesses. So I don't think Christians have to go, democracy is an absolute must, and therefore discount every other society throughout human history that has not had that and said that's necessarily bad. Not advocating that we should shift away from that, because that is part of our tradition and is borne out by perhaps some Christian ideas to some extent. But I think underneath that, though, however, you need a moral and ultimately a religious superstructure on which to hold that. Democracy cannot actually hold if you have two groups of people with completely opposed understandings of morality and completely opposed understandings of what the role of government is, or, by the way, completely opposed ideas of what you're calling human rights, you know, where because that assumes the rights of, you know, an individual and the rights of, you know, human beings to have innate worth regardless of their status in society. So what I think, and where I think we could come to a point of agreement, is that democracy removed from a Christian basis and foundation of the society actually leads to self-destruction, which is exactly what we see, by the way. So if we take the issue of abortion, that's exactly what is happening in our country, where we have people who have the right to vote, and then we have the unborn who obviously do not have the right nor the ability to vote, and we are discriminating against them in the name of human rights and democracy. So we see how that can shift. So you actually need to have a moral, and that is ultimately a religious superstructure for the society that infuses everything. And when you move away from that, democracy becomes destructive. So the fact that something is called democratic does not mean that it is good. It can be good and can be a good way of achieving things. And I like the idea of transfer of power through consensus rather than battle. Like, that's good. I think that's a good thing. But nonetheless, I think also there are some the idea that that's sufficient is the problem, as far as I see it.
Yeah.
And therefore, if we have to have a moral and religious, you know, foundation for our society, well, it should be the right one. And therefore, it's also right to publicly acknowledge that and to, I think, privilege and protect that superstructure and go, actually, without this, the things that we build on it, these concepts of democracy and human rights, will fall apart very, very quickly.
Yeah, I would say that I think you're channeling Doug Wilson quite a bit.
Okay.
So I think that's a sort of line, isn't it?
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah. I think maybe,
I have less of a beard.
The issue I'd see that is what Doug Wilson tends to do. He tends to say, like, look at the state we're in. This is the mess we've got to with secular democracy. So we've either got this, which is a disaster, or we need to go to Christian nationalism, explicitly Christian nation. They're the two options. Current one's terrible, so we need to go to the other one. I would tend to say that the system is neutral. And the problem we've got is the wrong people are getting elected. And the reason the wrong governments are getting elected is largely because of the values of the population. So if you imagine, it might be hard to imagine, if you imagine, right, Scottish Family Party has won the election, I'm going to be the First Minister of Scotland. So a lot of Doug Wilson's, and maybe yours as well, the things you object to in the nation, like you talked about the killing of the unborn, these would all stop. We don't need to change in the constitution or anything like that. We just need the right people elected, the people with the right values elected to form the government. And then that's the answer to these questions. But if you try and achieve it by another means, in a sense, it's without the consent of the people. And I think people are just not going to roll over and accept that. I don't think people are going to say, okay, it's not what the population wants, but, they've declared we're a Christian nation, so I guess we just have to go along with it. I think people wouldn't take that.
Yeah. So a couple of points on that, which so I think you're right. I think one of the things, though, we have to try and put together. I've been thinking through this because I think, yes, we absolutely want a moral population who are voting for the right things. And if we're talking about, so what we've slightly shifted the discussion here into how we get to outcomes that we like, and that are actually righteous outcomes for our nation. But I also think it's true that leaders do lead, and political leaders actually do have a role in leading the nation. I think the idea that they are merely followers of the will of the people is not just biblically inaccurate, actually, in terms of how the Bible describes, the roles of kings and so on, which I know we probably don't want to go into all of that necessarily. Maybe you do. You're welcome to do so if you like. But probably beyond the scope of this discussion. So leaders do lead. And that's not only biblically the case, but it's just also practically the case. So what's interesting is, we've just had, as you're very aware, although well done to Scotland for its recent it was assisted dying that they rejected, but the next day, basically, the House of Lords passed that we would decriminalize abortion up until birth. Now, this is something that only 1% of women in the UK want, are in favor of, and yet that is going to lead the population into accepting it, because the Bible's clear that the law is a school teacher. The law does actually shape our moral conscience. So, if you have laws that, let's say we got rid of the law to penalize murder, you would have more murder, and that would then impact the psyche and the conscience of the nation in a very negative way, and murder would become more acceptable. So we kind of have to marry the two a bit here, where, yes, in a democratic society, you cannot be at complete odds with the population. You have to go with something that is close to what the general population accepts as being within the Overton window plausibly acceptable. But actually, I think the role of Christian governance is also to go, well, actually, we want to push that in the right direction by enacting laws that move that towards the law of God, whether you arrive at that through natural law means or through, the 10 Commandments and the moral law of God as expressed in Scripture. So I think it's a little bit simplistic to say that the duty of government is to reflect the will of the people. That's not what Christians have ever really believed. Actually, Christians that have written on this, like Samuel Rutherford and Lex Rex, has talked about how actually the king is beholden to the King of Kings, and that is the ultimate standard here. And so whilst you can't, as a matter of prudence and wisdom, enact every law that you might like, you should be striving in that direction. To give a practical example, let's say the Scottish Family Party win in a have a good healthy win where they can start enacting laws. But you recognize that if you were to completely abolish abortion on day one, that would lead to mass rioting and an overthrow of your government, and it would end your ability to rule in a righteous manner. What you might do is push the law in a good direction,
because we'd have just got elected on that manifesto.
Sure. Okay. Well, then fair enough. But you would outlaw it on day one, maybe. But let's say that if that wasn't politically feasible, would it be okay to then do so gradually? I think it might be an acceptable political compromise, but you're still trying to lead the nation in the right direction using law as the way to do that. So that's I honestly don't even remember the question. That was my answer, though.
I totally agree. I totally agree that leaders should find themselves in a position and use their platform to promote all aspects of the Christian faith, the spiritual aspects as well. Yeah, they should present the gospel as well as trying to push for Christian values. I absolutely agree with that. It's just a matter of how they get into place. I think the strategy to get them into place should be that they put forward those values. People vote for them, especially Christians, you would hope, but other people as well vote for them. And I don't think there's any shortcuts to that route. And the thing I worry as well. Just to say, given the society in which we live and the tradition of these islands, I think that's right. I don't think calling for violent overthrow, that's not something I would advocate at all. And I think that would be a severe misstep. So it's more about what the government does when it gets there.
rather than how it gets there. I still think we got to get there through the means that you're describing, at least in our society. But I would say, broadly speaking, that is the right direction to go about this. So totally agreed. Sorry, continue. I cut you off that point. But
that's another thing we can tick off from the list. Stephen Wolfe basically advocates for violent revolution in the current United States of America.
Right. Okay.
That's my reading. But if we think about the Scottish Family Party, an example again, let's say we had in our manifesto, we're going to declare that Scotland's a Christian nation. And so we get elected, I'm the First Minister, and I make some declaration, Scotland's a Christian nation, I pass some law, I don't know what we do. And then the next election, let's say we make a real mess of the NHS and the economy, and we get voted out. And the next party is coming in and saying, no, we're not going to have this Christian nation thing anymore. And then there's another party saying, well, if you're saying you want a Christian nation, we're going to be the Muslim party. If we win the election, we're going to declare it a Muslim nation. To my mind, I don't see that really adds much to the really important thing, which is promoting the values, enacting good laws, using the platform to promote Christianity more widely. But the actual official declaration of being a Christian nation, I think that would get a lot of people's backs up. And I'm not sure what it advances.
Okay, well, let me give the example. The example I like of that is the coronation. So it's the coronation of King Charles. There are multiple elements to that. It's a profoundly Christian ceremony, where firstly he has to go to church, and it has to be the Archbishop of Canterbury that crowns him, and he holds an orb with a cross on top of it that symbolizes the globe and Christ's lordship over all nations. And then he has his own scepter, and that has a cross on top of it symbolizing that his lordship or his rule is under the lordship of Christ, that he's not a law unto himself. And he's handed the Bible, and he confesses that he's going to defend the Protestant Reformed religion, apparently, which, and I'm well aware that King Charles, I don't even think Justin Welby, to be honest, believe any of that in any serious sense. But not that I'm saying Justin Welby's not a Christian necessarily, but I don't think he believes what Christians believe about nations in that regard, and that is the job of the king. I still don't think that there's zero value in that. I think there's some value in acknowledging. I think it's actually quite important that if the foundation on which you are building these political outcomes is Christianity, I think acknowledging that is right. I think going, no, of course, this is who we are, and this is who we have been for 1,500 plus years, really, as a nation. And I think when you don't do that, when you just presume that, it does weaken it a little bit. And actually, there's an act of preservation and of protection of that value system that happens when you do formally acknowledge it. Now, I think the formal acknowledgement on its own is insufficient, but I don't think there's no value in it. And I mean, Christians, lots of people, the argument that, well, what happens when the next party gets in? That's going to be true of everything that happens, though. The next party that gets in can always undo what has been done to a reasonable extent if they have the political will to do so, and the seats and the votes. So the question is not necessarily, well, what might happen if X, but it's, well, what is right to do at this point? And the fact is that, the secularists are absolutely doing that, and the Muslims are absolutely doing that. They absolutely want a secular nation or a Muslim nation. I know that they're not quite there in the UK in terms of numbers, but everywhere that Islam has taken over, that nation is a Muslim nation, and that's enshrined into the laws of that nation. So everybody is advancing their religion, whatever that is, and we do ultimately live in a spiritual war that is a battle between religions. And so I think for Christians to go, no, look, we're Christian. That doesn't mean we hate everybody that isn't. That actually causes us to love them and want to reach them, and that's why we're the best religion, because it's true and it's good and it's beautiful. And And so we can publicly acknowledge, yes, of course we're Christian. Like we've been Christian, that it's infused everything that we do. Even our secular liberals are a lot more Christian than they realize. They're functionally, an offshoot of Christianity and a warped understanding of it. But nonetheless, they're basing their things on some pretty Christian assumptions that most people didn't make. So I don't sort of sit there and stress, what if someone else is going to do that? Because number one, they absolutely are. And secondly, it's still, I think, a good and right thing to do. Might not be the top priority, to given certain political, whatever the politically feasible things are and the priorities are, if we are successful electorally. But there's I don't think there's zero value in it, is what I'm saying. I think actually it's a good thing. And if it is the foundation on which you build everything else, acknowledging it, protecting it, putting it in certain ways is a good thing to do.
Yeah, I would agree. Talking about the coronation, I completely agree. That's a good thing. When the Scottish Parliament reconvenes after an election, they all go to the Giles Cathedral and have some service there. And it's probably absolute drivel, but they do go to a church and some ministers. So there is some sort of nod towards Christianity. I'm all for that sort of thing. I'm all for it. And in terms of the UK's officially Christian status, I don't want to overturn that. But in terms of trying to put it forward as a new declaration for Scotland, I think that's different. We're talking about Muslims. Like we've got some Muslims in the family party, not many, because a lot of them left over Gaza because we didn't say what they wanted us to say. So we've got a handful of Muslims. And I think in the longer term, if we want a united nation in the future, then the sort of Muslims that will join the family party are, I would say, in general, going to be the sort of people who probably can integrate and we can have a harmonious future. Whereas if the emphasis becomes too much on, no, we're the Christians, then the Muslims think, well, what are we going to do? We're just going to have to start our own party. Now, I know that's happening already, but I don't want that to happen. So then that's the other side. So like the coronation, etc. I like. The other thing with the Christian nation idea, this idea that we've been a Christian nation for 1,500 years or whatever. If you imagine you were in a country that had been, I don't know, like cannibals for the last 1,000 years, and they became Christians 20 years ago. If someone said, "Look, we've been a cannibal nation for 1,500 years," I mean that's our whole culture is based on that. So the laws of the land ought to reflect our traditions and heritage. I think we would say, well, no, because it's wrong.
Sure. Yes.
So how is that different in the case of Christianity?
It's again, it comes back to the thing of Christianity is true, and therefore it's fine to accept Christianity, and it's not fine to accept cannibalism as the foundation of your society. So one of those things God has a problem with. The ground isn't history, though.
The ground isn't our history. The ground is because it's good now. It's the best for the society now.
Yes, that is the ultimate ground. That is the ultimate ground. But the fact that it is part of our history and the fact that it is our tradition is also valuable, and that gives us a greater. It's another layer to the argument. It's not a sufficient argument in and of itself. But you're going no. Not only is it the right ground, but it is the one that built this nation and that has been very good for this nation, and therefore returning to that, or actually, I think, continuing to stand for. I don't accept, for instance, that we are now a secular nation. I know a lot of Christians do, but I'm like, no, the weight of history is very much on our side, and this has been a little silly experiment in secularism that's doomed to fail and will fail promptly. So I'm not handing over our nation to secularism just yet. That there may well be a day when we get there and we have to go, yes, we are secular and we need to take it back. But I'm not even at that point yet. I think there's enough Christianity. Just because a nation has a blip doesn't mean that you sacrifice all of that history. Say, well, we were secular for a period. But the fact that is our history and that has been good to us means that this is not a particularly radical position for Brits to take. So I think it's a useful, practical and pragmatic argument to make. We're totally Christian, and that's been very good. When we were at our most Christian, we were probably at our best as a nation. and did the best things for the people of these islands and for those across the world, not without flaws and foibles, but we were a good nation, and so why would we not want to return to that? Because one of the things that I think is a stumbling block for people is people hear you want to have a Christian nation and they go, oh my goodness, that's very out there. How could you possibly say that? And actually you go, no, like this was the complete norm for all. We are the weird ones for finding that weird. And so that's again, I'm not saying it's a sufficient argument in itself, but it's part of the argument, and it's a practically useful tool for convincing people to at least consider this option.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think that when you were talking there, it was making me thinking, it was sounding like the sort of Doug Wilson definition of secularism. Again, there. To my definition of secularism is a system of government that doesn't favor any particular religion. It doesn't get it like constitutionally doesn't favor any particular religion. People can get elected and the government can put into practice what values it like, but the actual system itself is neutral with regard to religions. That's what I think is meant by secularism.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas I think when Doug Wilson says secularism, I think he means like atheist, progressive, hyper-liberal mess that we're in.
Sure.
Which do you use?
And I would say that the first one doesn't exist. That you cannot have a government that is completely religiously neutral.
No, not the government, the system.
Okay, you can't have a system.
Democratic system.
Every system has baked into it principles and moral foundations that are coming from somewhere. That you can't have zero. So even the idea that we should vote on something and that person's opinion matters as much as that person's opinion, that's kind of a Christian idea. It's not I don't think it's necessarily a perfect representation of a Christian idea because there could be a little bit more to it than that. But nonetheless, that's not. There are whole religions that would say, well, that's insane. We could never have that. Actually, we have the caste system here, and actually, if you're in the Brahmin, then your opinion matters a lot more. And so I think the idea of a neutral system is one that I don't think really can exist. Like democracy came from certain, you can go to Greece or whatever, but modern democracy is very much an aspect of Christian societies in Europe and has been influenced by that as a result. So I don't think that the first one really exists. I still think these are functioning in a Christian manner, and therefore, in order to protect that system, you should acknowledge that Christianity is the one that gave you that system, and so yeah.
I was still. We're maybe splitting hairs a little bit. I have one more.
It's fine. It's interesting. I really like the discussion. I'm very
imagine
very
we had an
happy.
island. Okay, imagine you had a tiny island. There's 10 people on the island. They got together and said, "I know what we'll do. Well, we've got a decision to make. We'll take a vote on it. And if there's not a majority, we won't do it. If there is a majority, we'll do it. How about that? That's our constitution." I think that is neutral. It's not favoring one religion or another. I mean, that maybe the person suggested that might have had that idea on the basis of Christian view about the equal rights of every human being. They might have had that.
Yeah, it's a Christian.
But the
it's a Christian
system itself,
that's a Christian.
I would say is neutral.
But that's a Christian idea, is what I would say. Is I don't think. I think in most islands, if you had a whole mix of religions on that or different religious worldviews, they go, no, you don't get a vote. You're not a Muslim, or your vote doesn't count as much. So it is a Christian idea. But then you have to, if you like that system, you then have to protect the foundation of it through protecting and privileging Christianity, in the legal system. So because otherwise it becomes actually that doesn't hold together in the long term. So in interest of protecting the most equal system, the way to do that, I think, is to privilege Christianity, because Christianity has produced the most equality for different people and recognizes the rights of the vulnerable and the minority and so on to an extent that other religions don't do.
Okay, I think there's a tension there, potentially, between the idea that Christian values say everyone's views equally valid. Everyone's made in the image of God, equal worth, equal dignity. Everyone should have a say, and we don't privilege anyone in the democratic process. Then on the other hand, saying that but somehow, I mean, some of the Christian nationalists would say only Christians should get a vote. So I say, I mean, that's obviously a direct contradiction. But if you're going to say in some way that the views of Christians are going to be privileged in a way beyond their individual vote or influence or whatever, then I think there's a tension coming in there. I mean, if you look at, say, Iran, they would say, okay, we have elections and we elect a government, but the religious leaders call the shots because we're a Muslim country and we're going to be operating on Muslim principles. So we have an election. Everyone can vote in the election. That's fine. But we're a Muslim country. So we've got this other influence as well. Do you see the tension there?
Yes, but so Christianity does have an answer to that. Again, this idea that there is sphere sovereignty, as Christians have often called it, that, you know, the state is a minister of God. He's answerable to God. He's called a deacon of God. Literally, that's the word in Romans 13. But it is a different form of ministry. It is not the ministry of the church. And so the idea that these are separate, and actually we don't have the bishops or whatever, you know, or whatever, the pastor, the Baptist pastor, Billy Graham in America or something, doesn't run the country just because he's Billy Graham. That once again is an outflow of Christianity and going, no, there are different spheres here of authority, but they all sit under God. That's the overarching thing. Is the government is a minister of God. Which God is that? To which God is he accountable? The answer is the real one. The actual God of the world, the triune God that Christians believe in. And so what are we calling the government to do? We're not calling the government to submit to a body of pastors. We are calling him to submit to God. And the role of the pastor is to go, no, you have to do this because God says, actually, this is your responsibility. But then I think the government should go, yes, we do acknowledge that God, and that God is the right God, and he provides the right foundation for this society, and therefore to go, we serve that God as a government is a good thing to do.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that in lots of ways. So again, when the family party is the government, I mean, let's say there's a couple of people in there who are not Christians.
Sure.
And so I would be happy to talk about the way that what we're doing is founded on Christian truth. It's God's wisdom. We think it's best for the nation. I will explain all that. And that would all be there. But I would also have in my mind, I don't want to totally alienate substantial portions of the population there. So it would be a balance. Can you show a video clip?
Yeah, sure.
It's 1 minute long. This is a man who's basically saying something I think we'd agree with. But to my mind, he's saying it in a way that's just totally shooting himself in the foot. So
sure.
Listen to this.
Go
what do
ahead.
you think?
Yeah.
We should not hesitate to tell people, not because we are so wise, not because we made the rules of the world, we didn't. We humbly submit to how God made the rules of the world, and we say, this is how we should order our lives together. And frankly, yes, we are going to impose it upon you. If you don't like it, I'm sorry, but this is good and right and just if it lines up with God's standards. And I am going to enforce my morality on you in as much as our morality is God's morality. And you should always check yourselves. Again, I'm not trying to puff you up. Check yourself. Do I believe what God believes? Am I defending what God says is good? And if it is, then you should have the courage to say, this is how we're going to run our town. This is how we're going to run our county. This is how we're going to run our state. And this is how we should run the United States of America, by legislating the morality that we can find in the Bible.
What do you think of that?
Yeah. So that's a friend of mine, William Wolfe. Actually, I know him reasonably well. Honestly, I mean, so there's, I think where you and I may have, where our issues lie are probably in a similar place, actually, which is on prudence and is on wisdom and is on rhetoric. Because there's no doubt that the government does impose morality, what kind of morality? Well, I don't think it necessarily imposes private morality, but it does impose public morality. That is what the government does. So thou shalt not murder, not murdering, that's a moral thing. Not stealing, that's a moral thing. That's not really a particularly questionable overall sentiment. Again, I think wider context, I'm assuming he gives that rather than me personally forcing you to do what I want you to do. But Christians, as they engage in so for instance, in the Scottish Family Party, you guys, if you're outlawing abortion, that is an imposition of morality. Of course it is. Yes, that's what laws actually do. All laws impose morality. But I think where Brits, and probably more so even the English than the Northern Irish, because we tend to be a little bit more sort of brash and outspoken, but where we sort of struggle with our American friends is that level of directness comes across as very brash and comes across as actually counterproductive to the case that we're trying to make, which is actually we want to persuade you that this is the right morality, and therefore we would like it to be your morality, or at least the morality of the society in general, and get there through those means. Is kind of what we are aiming at. So I think, obviously you don't know what context. I don't know if that was in a Sunday message or if that was in a small political, I don't know what he was speaking to there. I would certainly not be using that as my political messaging. But would I go, generally speaking, what he's saying is broadly accurate if said a little bit in a fashion that makes me squirm, because that's not going to help you win any political arguments. There's still a large degree of truth in what he said there. So yeah, again, you have the challenge, which is not a challenge I have, which is why I think we probably view things slightly differently, although I don't think we're too different in this regard. You're trying to build a political coalition for a party. You're trying to win votes. I speak as a pastor who doesn't have to worry really about the political consequences of how I articulate things in the same way. Now I have to worry about other consequences, but not the political ones. And therefore, I think those who are in the political sphere do have to be a lot more thoughtful and actually try and win people around, rather than going, well, this and only this, and you will submit one way or another. Is just not a way to win votes or arguments.
Yeah, I would agree. Although it's fascinating, I say what the chap was saying. I didn't realize that he knew. I think it's fascinating what he's saying, because basically his principle I agree with. But if you think about abortion, for example, my pitch would never be, look, I'm a Christian, so this is what I believe, so we're going to make you do it as well. I mean, that's just a formula for resistance and rebellion. The pitch has always got to be, I'd say, either this is right or this is what's going to be best for the nation. This is going to help solve a problem. So anyone who wants to solve this problem, we're offering a solution to it. And that's the way to go. So that was an interesting one.
And I think we can. This is an important part actually of Christian apologetics. Let's call it that. Is that there are reasons why God has laws and God has moral standards, and part of the reason for that, or part of the reason why we want to advocate for those, is that they are what is best for the world. So it's not about actually we're doing it simply to impose our will. We can actually make the argument based on this is what is good for our society. This is what is good for people. And so when it comes to an apologetic strategy, which we could put this all under that broad, winning arguments, right? Then that we actually have a very powerful and persuasive tool on our side, which is, well, God made the world, and therefore whatever he has commanded is good. And so we can convince people of the goodness of that. And where society is somewhat rational and has some sort of moral conscience, then that is a winnable argument. Now, sadly, many people don't have that, and there are times where that is much harder than we would hope. But nonetheless, that's a much better angle to go after something like this, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I'll just make a few final remarks and then a few parting shots, and we'll wrap things up. I mean, I really enjoyed the discussion. Very, very, very.
Likewise.
I say we're very, very close in our views. There's slight differences here and there, but yeah. To sum up on Christian nationalism, where do I see it heading in Britain? I guess one of my fears is it will sort of divide our side, if you like. As I say, I used to think we were at the end of the spectrum, but now it seems that people keep adding more and more sections to the spectrum. So I worry it could bring division among what maybe previously had been quite a united group. Now, I worry for some people there might be an element of syncretism. The UK church, left-wing syncretism has been a major, major problem forever. But I'm very concerned now that there might be right-wing syncretism coming in as well. So people look at the Christian nation, look at Islam, and then the gospel becomes something like, put your faith in Jesus, and then we can keep Britain a Christian country and keep the Muslims out. And that sort of becomes the gospel. I think I've seen a little bit of that sort of thing. I've been a little bit uneasy about. I think the church is going to be an export business, exporting its values into the world, not the world's or political issues coming back to the church. But I think the sort of popular level Christian nationalism is a massive opportunity for the church, because in Britain there are millions of people, so more or less wanting to be Christians. That's the flag they want to fly, and if they want to fly that flag, yes, great, go to church should be an obvious next step. So I think the opportunities far outweigh my concerns on this issue, I think. So I'm very optimistic for how things are going to develop on this in the future.
Yeah, very good. I think I agree with what you say there. I think that sort of adopting a sloganeering Christianity devoid of personal salvation or piety or anything like that, or even, by the way, which can be the case, making public theology the entirety of what we're talking about is probably not healthy or wise. Actually, there's more to the faith than that. Now, that's not to say that isn't part of the faith, and it's been a neglected part of the faith. So no surprise that we're talking about that a bit more as we see problems arise and digging into that. And we're finding people digging into this a lot in different Christian circles. I think my biggest concern in the UK, I'll pause there for a second. A lot of what we've talked about has been Americans and their understanding of this. And Americans are a bit different. They're a different culture to us, and will talk in very different terms that can be unappealing to the British. So a lot of what we've talked about as the downsides of this and the more extreme ideas, those are not coming from British sources. Actually, I think the British people that would be discussing this on any serious level actually are having a very reasonable and serious discussion about it and going, we wouldn't. You Americans can say something that's way too out there because it'll sell more books. We won't quite do that because we don't operate that way. I think my main concern is that the church, broadly speaking, as we said at the start of this, has zero thought about Christian public witness in anything other than complete capitulation to the world as we now see it. And actually, we do need a much more robust and thoughtful Christian witness that is more aligned to historic Christian understanding of this. And so, whilst there might be some kinks for us to work out between us who are advocating for it, I think the biggest concern I have is that the church will broadly go, no, we couldn't possibly do any of this. Why would we want our nation to be Christian, or even to have Christian values, or to get there, by any means other than simple mass revival, without hopefully having to do any of the actual work like you're doing of political engagement and trying to advocate for these ideas in the public square. So, but likewise, I am hopeful. I think the discussions I've had, including ones like this, I think are really helpful and healthy. And I think that we have something as Brits with as we've talked about, a very long heritage of a Christian nation. That something we can hopefully add to the sort of more global discussion on this topic. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Jamie. I've really enjoyed our time chatting. Hopefully, viewers will find that enlightening and interesting and entertaining as well. Jamie, we've got to finish. I can't use your lines. I just can't deliver it the right way. But you need to tell people to smash the like button before we finish.
Oh, yeah. Well, whatever you do, don't smash the like button. Just smash something else and then press the like button normally, because it turns out YouTube doesn't notice the velocity with which you smash the button. So it works fine if you just press it in a normal fashion. So if you need to smash something else, press the like button in a normal fashion.